Today's show is supported by A-Plus Schools. Fun fact, my first job here in Pittsburgh was as an education reporter. If you think what happens in schools doesn't affect you because you're done with that era or you don't have kids of your own, you are respectfully so incorrect. A good education is the cornerstone of society. For many of us, it is the driver of economic mobility. But too many kids here in Pittsburgh aren't showing up often enough to do well. Last year in Pittsburgh, over 5,500 students missed a month or more of school. That's nearly 1/3 of the entire district. A-Plus Schools is on a mission to help solve this problem, and they want you to help them do it. You can donate, have A-Plus come speak to your community group or club, or just learn about the issues so you can be a good and vocal advocate for Pittsburgh students. Because when kids don't go to school, they fall behind. And when they fall behind, they don't want to go. Find out how you can show up for our kids at aplusschools.org. Today on CityCast Pittsburgh. My fellow Pennsylvanians, it is once again budget season. Our state budget this time. Governor Josh Shapiro just presented his $51.5 billion plan, tapping into the Commonwealth's Rainy Day Fund and presenting a whole bunch of priorities for what he wants to do about cannabis, our aging transit systems, education, and a lot more. We're going to run through what you need to know, plus how Shapiro just let us know that he is clearly Team Sheetz. It's Monday, February 10th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I'm with Stephen Caruso, Capitol reporter for Spotlight PA. Stephen, how's it going?
Hanging in there. Just another week in paradise.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any budget day traditions? Like, do you watch from home? Do you go in person? Is there a live stream situation?
Watch from home. No, I go to the Capitol. What would I gain from watching from home?
I don't know. Maybe you just have a really cozy couch setup situation. I don't know.
You can't follow the You can follow the legislature from your couch if you are an active citizen and a journalist, like many people. But it's not for me. It's not for me. I'm there in the building. There's always a cavalcade of press responses. All the press runs from the gallery to one press conference for the Senate Republicans to the one for the House Democrats to maybe some other people. You get lots of in-person press releases, actually printed out. It's a whole thing. And so many people show up. It's so much fun.
You get your steps in, is what you're saying.
I mean, yeah.
People ask me sometimes why I care about this. I don't know if this is the kind of thing that your friends very honestly say to your face. But I guess the way I usually describe a state budget is that it's kind of a wish list. You get a sense of someone's priorities. It doesn't mean that it's actually going to happen. I'm wondering if that tracks for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, budgets are mortal documents is sort of a talking point that is often used by Democrats, but I think everybody can say it. I mean, what budgets are is it's your state spending plan. You might have to have a budget in your own life about how much money you spend on, takeout or your pet or just, how long you can run the heat every day. And this is the state doing that for itself. I mean, this is how much money goes to educating kids, how much money goes to fixing roads, how much money goes to the state police, how much money is going to go to tax breaks for selected politically connected people.
Ooh.
That's what budgets are, and it's important to pay attention to the details.
I mean, any hot takes this cycle for you?
I always have hot takes. I mean, I look, I almost feel I feel like we should talk about that at the end, because if I go off on all my hobby horses at the start, we're never going to get to the meat of this thing.
Well, then let's jump right into some of the big stuff that Governor Shapiro hit this time. We'll kick off in one of our favorite places, cannabis, because Governor Shapiro asked for full legalization again. You and I just talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show, where you outlined all the reasons why it could, but maybe won't happen this year. So we'll link that in the show notes. But I guess I'm curious from your perspective, Shapiro wants it. Does that actually matter?
I think that the running trend of the last 2 years, and I think I won't even pick on Shapiro, of any governor. It's one thing for a governor to want it. It's another thing to then go into the legislature, find the right lawmakers, hope that you have leverage, like, say, a party that agrees with you. Tom Wolf never had a Democratic chamber. Governor Shapiro has a Democratic House, and then like develop the policy and use the bully pulpit, use your political capital to go to every recalcitrant committee chair, legislative leader, or rank and file person and push that thing through. Those are two very different statements.
I mean, we did get some new details this time about what it could look like which departments would regulate sales. That would be agriculture and health, where
He
the
said that
revenue would
last
go.
year.
I know where the revenue would go, which would be like general fund. The other one was restorative justice programs and social equity
All that was
programs.
last year. He said all this last year. Sorry, Megan.
I know, but like, does outlining specifics like that actually help the cause? I guess not if he's done it 2 years running.
I mean, look, I think they've said they're going to have specific draft language. Senior administration officials noted that on budget day that we'll have a little bit more in the future. And that was the biggest complaint I especially heard from Senate Republicans is the governor didn't really have anything more than just, I think you should legalize marijuana. They've said this complaint also applies to many other times he pushes an issue. It's just they're like, that's a great statement. Well, can you come into the trenches and help us get this done? I'll even say, Dan Frankel, chair of the health committee in the House, has said that
And
he
one of
thought the
Allegheny
governor
County's
was
representatives.
yeah, like he even said he thought the governor was kind of hands off in this. I think that could be changing. And so we'll see. I mean, I don't
I
know,
like how
man.
you're trying really hard not to completely poo-poo our dreams over here, but the answer's still no.
I just legislative policy is hard to pass, and we could have another. That's another conversation if you just want me to opine about legislative processes. But it's hard to pass stuff.
We'll keep your number for that one. Shapiro also riffed for a while on our embarrassingly low minimum wage. He even compared us to Ohio and West Virginia. That always, gets some applause. Do you think that's going to move this year?
Can you just repeat my last answer? No, look, I think that is an issue that does have bipartisan support. There are senators that have supported it. Members of the House leader, Matt Bradford, though, said, the dynamic in all this stuff is Shapiro says he wants it. There are Republican moderates who say they're willing to support it. Republican, more conservative leadership says, okay, maybe if we put the number down and then House Democrats end up passing the thing and then just everything kind of dies. It's more a question of can everybody get into a room and cut a deal that everyone can live with? Or it's about trades. Harrisburg runs on trades. Okay, House Democrats get a $15 minimum wage. What do they have to pass from Senate Republicans from their priority list that'll get that back? That's what this is all about. If they can come to the point where they can find the quid pro quo between the chambers to get this all done, that's sort of a conversation that'll happen in the next 5 months.
Do you know what Senate Republicans need? What's on their wish list right now? It sounds like maybe that's a conversation we should also have here at the top.
I mean, look, I think that a lot of the stuff sometimes gets into really deep specifics I don't always have all the detail of. But I can tell you, for instance, last year in the 2024 budget, if I'm not mistaken, Senate Republicans were offered a steeper increase in corporate tax cuts, and I believe some other extra tax loopholes that would just or net operating loss. I believe just a handful of these sort of basically things that would make cut business taxes to help with innovation. It would be the way they're opposed by the business community in exchange for a higher minimum wage. Or in 2019, when Governor Tom Wolf did get a small minimum wage increase out of the Senate, it was in exchange for him backing off of this overtime rule that expanded who was eligible for overtime. That's how you kind of get things moving in Harrisburg, particularly on minimum wage. So what the Senate GOP wish list looks like this time, I do not know, but it's probably going to be something in that area.
Well, it sounds like Shapiro was listening because corporate tax cuts came up again in this budget.
Yes, and that's something he did even campaign on. I mean, look, the reduction in the corporate net income tax rate was even passed or signed by Governor Tom Wolf, passed by a Republican General Assembly. I do see tax rates, corporate tax rates, stuff like that as a big bargaining chip going forward into this budget cycle.
So let's talk some more about those wish list items. Education is always a big part of every state budget. A couple of years ago, just a reminder for folks, a judge ruled that the way Pennsylvania issues funds to school districts all across the state is so inequitable, so unfair, so broken that it was also unconstitutional and creates this huge gap between rich and poor school districts. Right now, lawmakers are supposed to be figuring out a better way to fund schools. It's been 2 years. Sounds like some public education advocates are not entirely happy with Shapiro's proposal. I'm curious what you heard in the room, maybe how it was received.
Yeah, I think Shapiro's speech kind of started with him trying to talk up what he thought they had accomplished together, because this is his first budget address of the new session, the 2 year session. It's sort of the with the presidential election over, it's now kind of Shapiro's turn to be preparing for his reelection in 2026. So he ran down, like, for instance, that $1 billion more are going into education, much of it targeting poorer districts. That got massive applause from Democrats. Now when he threw out his number. In fact, I can't remember if he mentioned the number for poor districts, but it's about $500 million. I think there was more tepid applause. Look, that's a less than I think education advocates, the sort of folks who filed the lawsuit that you mentioned,
Hmm.
want. They were hoping to fill it in 4 years, and if I'm not mistaken, the number they want is somewhere in the range of $5-6 billion. I think it's even higher than that. Point is, half a billion doesn't really get you that far in that regard. But with that said, I think that there is Democrats are always going to cheer for more money for education, and frankly, I think there are a lot of Republicans who cheer for that too. It's just good politics.
Shapiro's proposing some changes to the way cyber charters get funded. He wants to set a base, like a statewide tuition rate, which would be very different and something that public school advocates have been pushing for a while. I know Shapiro took a lot of the heat in 2022 when he talked about school vouchers. What do you think? Like, is that the voucher conversation? Is that dormant or has it died? Because there was a lot of traction among Democrats when he was being considered for vice president. The candidate for Kamala
Mhm.
Harris, like vouchers did not fly well in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, look, Shapiro, pretty much anytime you ask the official side what his stance on vouchers is, they'll kind of point back to statements of he's generally supportive, but it's fallen off of the list of things he actively talks about. Now, Senate Republicans will always take all the time they can to note that they are still annoyed at the fact that that deal fell through in 2023, where they thought they were going to get $100 million for vouchers, and then Shapiro backtracked and ended up vetoing the dollars to get House Democrats on board. They're still mad. They see it as unfinished business. They consistently say they want to get wins on that. It kind of was not really a conversation in last year's budget. Shapiro didn't bring it up, and it's still a hard no from House Democrats, but I'm sure Senate Republicans will keep bringing it up. And, we're talking about trade items. Once again, I'm sure that for Senate Republicans, there might be some stuff they're willing to throw on the table if House Democrats will agree to pass vouchers. But this is a big issue, and transactional politics are people aren't always fans of transactional politics, but politics is politics.
CityCast is supported today by City Charter High School. If you've got a kiddo ready for grades 9 through 12, City Charter High School is looking for you. They're hosting a new admissions open house on March 22nd from 10 a.m. to noon, where parents and prospective students can tour the school, check out classrooms, talk with teachers and student ambassadors, and even apply, all right there in person. City High has been educating in the heart of downtown for over 20 years. Their totally unique 4-day-a-week schedule runs year-round, and educators stay with the same students all 4 years. Plus, all students get a free laptop, complete a 13-week mentored internship. They can even take a sabbatical. They get real experience with stuff like research and writing, media literacy, problem solving, and even dressing for an occasion. If you want your baby to finish 12th grade with a resume, job training, and networking experience, consider City Charter High School. Visit cityhigh.org for more information or to apply today.
Shopping is hard, right? But there's a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And she sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what I love and send back the rest. It's so easy. Personal styling for everyone. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
So we're talking about the budget. Let's move on to transit. Our system here in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh Regional Transit would get about $40 million, according to this proposal. The head of that group here, Catherine Kellerman, said that we actually need $117 million to avoid things like devastating service cuts, layoffs, higher fares for everybody. So obviously this falls short. I am guessing that our friends in SEPTA over in Philly are probably having similar thoughts. How are people responding to Shapiro's transit proposal?
I feel like it's the same as it ever was. I mean, just in the sense of we're still at this issue where Democrats and Shapiro want to put more money in the transit. What they propose is $290 million more for operating expenses to the agencies. So that's like, pays for bus driver salaries, gas to go in the bus, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been threats from SEPTA, from PRT. I didn't even know PRT has been threatening service cuts. Fare hikes.
Some of that came
cuts.
up, I think, because our county was talking about maybe cutting some of the county budget. And of course, I mean, as you probably know, like if we pay $1 here locally, often that's multiplied at the state level. So it was a really, really bad thing to be considering cuts here. And now we're also talking about the state budget. Like there's just so many moving pieces to those budgets because they're so complicated.
Yeah, no, they are. So this is to say, so the plan is, $290 million new dollars going to the public transit agencies across the state, and they range from SEPTA and PRT to little county agencies that just ferry old people to their doctor's appointments. And the problem is, how do you get that money? The state has the structural deficit. It has. We're dipping into our rainy day fund to pay for this year's budget. Already, yes. Or Shapiro's plan requires us to do that. So if you want to have more regular assistance to agencies, you need to have sustainable regular funding for it. I mean, that's just kind of budgeting 101.
I mean, who should be funding these agencies? Like, should it be at the local level? Is the state level make more sense? Like, could the federal government, in some reality, chip in more? Like, are there other states that have figured this out in a way that maybe we could tap into those good ideas?
Like New Jersey implemented a tax on really big corporations to try and pay for it. That was one thing. I think every state is dealing with different issues when it comes to transit because, with changing work patterns and, people work from home, commuting is a little bit different in the post-COVID world. Like, a lot of transit agencies are dealing with it. So I mean, how to fund public services is always kind of a question. I will say the conversation in Harrisburg is really revolved around skill games. Those are the little machines you might see at your local convenience store, bar. If you go to a VFW, you might see them there. The argument for skill games funding has been to regulate them, tax them, and throw that money to transit. I think there are some folks who get squeamish about funding important government systems like transit with sin taxes, just with the thought of, that's, I mean.
The quote unquote sin tax thing in Pennsylvania always cracks me up. I mean, gambling. They mean gambling.
I mean, look, gambling, alcohol, the state sells alcohol, marijuana, that would be a sin tax. I'm not even trying to be moralistic here. It's just,
I know, it feels very Quaker, it really goes down to our Pennsylvania roots.
Yeah, exactly. But this is to say, the plan for transit is to use gambling revenues to pay for the new potential spending. And then also you have people who say if you're going to talk about transportation, we also should throw money for car infrastructure in there as well. So it just gets to be this really big, multi-sided debate that isn't just about should our buses show up on time. It turns into should buses show up on time while driving on new roads, all funded by the gambling machine that's in the corner store across the street from the bus stop.
And we'll move on to energy. Shapiro talked a lot about it and wanting to invest in production, but also put a cap on carbon emissions. How would that work? Do we have any sense of that yet?
It's effectively very similar to a plan that Pennsylvania is already supposed to enter, but it's on legal hold, known as RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Power plant operators would have to pay for carbon credits to release carbon into the atmosphere. The idea is that, by putting a price on carbon, it reduces their emissions and incentivizes non-carbon energy. That's the hope. Shapiro's plan would be to have the revenue, have the system be centered within Pennsylvania, run by the state of Pennsylvania, instead of Reggie, which is a interstate group that's run out of New York City. He's argued, no, we should do it all ourselves. I think it's also worth noting that all the members of Reggie are like northeastern states that don't have big fossil fuel industries, but Pennsylvania, coal, gas, oil. We don't have as much oil production now, but like all this stuff is
But we have
endemic
the
to the
history
state.
of it, and I think that
Yeah.
still kind of resonates with folks.
Oh, precisely. I mean, all of that does like we are the we're in the top five energy producing states in the country. I think we might be second behind Texas. Like, so, different solutions might be needed for Pennsylvania, but effectively what Shapiro has pitched is still very similar to Reggie. And the energy industry opposes it. Trade unions are supportive of it, and they were one of the biggest hangups for when Governor Tom Wolf tried to impose this similar plan because they build fossil fuel power plants or repair existing ones. I think energy politics are always tricky in our state, and this is just Shapiro's attempt to try and forge his own path that appeals to all the various sides.
Yeah, I mean, he's talked a lot about hydrogen production in the past, too. I know folks have differing opinions on that. But, as we're having this conversation, President Trump has also declared a national emergency, an energy emergency, and says he wants to boost fossil fuel production in the U.S. I mean, can both of those things happen in Pennsylvania at the same time, boosting fossil fuels and also investing in clean energy sources?
Look, I think the line that Shapiro even used to open his press conference in Pittsburgh on this is that he's an all of the above energy governor. So
But is
I
that a real
think
thing?
I think what we can say is that if we're just talking about electricity, yes, your electricity, you could have solar panels, windmills, nuclear plants, and coal and gas all providing electricity to the same grid. It's more of what is the purpose? If your goal is just to maximize electricity production, that isn't that hard. But if your goal is to maximize electricity production while also being mindful of the long-term impacts of pumping carbon into the atmosphere, leading to an acceleration of the greenhouse effect, harming the globe's climate, that's a trickier conversation that this country has struggled to find a solution for the past 20, 30 years. So that's my best attempt to summarize that argument.
We'll let it lie for now. I mean, I guess stepping back a little bit, I feel like, Shapiro and other governors across the nation are proposing budgets. We are in budget season. They're talking about their priorities. But we also have a new president, a new administration changing the landscape every single day in wildly different ways. How do you think that Trump's evolving vision for the nation could be likely to affect Shapiro's plans?
It's hard to say. Shapiro himself hasn't offered much insight into how it's changed his thinking. I should say, too, in some ways, it's almost like one of these questions that's like so large, it almost makes redundant any conversations we could have on a state level. Like,
I mean, I don't hear Shapiro talking directly, like one-on-one to people very often anymore. Like he did it a ton when he was the attorney general, but as he's become governor and he's kind of like moved up a peg since he was being considered for vice president or a candidate for vice president, it's just different. He doesn't seem to do that level of conversation with folks. So I don't hear how he speaks. I'm wondering if you get any sense of it from the Capitol, I guess.
Well, like he did on the day that the federal spending freeze came down. He held a gaggle where he talked through it, and he mentioned federal funding aids many state programs, from career links that help people find new jobs. Obviously, Medicaid is a dual run program between the state and the feds, heavily subsidized. Benefits like SNAP, which are distributed from the states for the most part, utility aid. We could go down the list. There's lots of programs that our states do that are funded by federal dollars. In fact, and to go back to like my point about but my point that I was wanted to make is that like the state budget is $51 billion in state money. Federal money kicks in $53 billion, and that's for human services, transportation. So if the federal government does freeze its spending, it's sort of like I don't know if there's any budgetary tricks or tax changes that could replace that. It's just kind of like we're going to be dealing with an entirely different government on every level. And I feel like the Shapiro has sort of explained that. To go back to your question about like Shapiro is talking, like he kind of explained that he put it more at a third. I would want to double check his numbers on that. my understanding is, federal money is perhaps one of the largest buckets of state spending, or one of the largest sources of state spending. But Shapiro put it as a third, a third, a third.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot to think about. And then, also, I feel like at the same time, we're seeing a lot of analysis, like, looking at him on a stage, looking like an executive. There's still this lingering question about who Shapiro's going to be in a couple of years. Like, does he run again for governor in 2026? Does he consider running for president in 2028? I mean, are you getting any sense of the tea leaves at this point?
I think that the governor clearly has ambitions for higher office. I think everyone who has interacted with him for probably the past decade has known this. I think that most of what he does can probably run through the lens of how is this also about his actions looking forward. I also think that, particularly for government reporters such as myself and all reporters, it's very important to be aware of the ambitions of the people we cover, but the ambitions should never get in the way of us trying to cover the hard policy of, this budget. And, I think that there's so much of Harrisburg, I would argue, right now is sort of influenced behind the scenes by the fact that there is a very ambitious man leading our state government. And it's funny because sometimes ambition can lead to people doing really amazing things in the name of building up their brand and building up their image in the hope of, good results lead to a better job, better work. Wouldn't that be the ideal of free market? And other times, ambition is just ambition. I think that the governor has lots of time to sort out where he fits into that ambition equation. And I also think that you can't discount the fact that other people see the ambition and might want to try and screw with him just because of it.
Well, we'll land this where we started. Stephen, do you have any hot takes from the budget address this cycle?
I think that one of the more interesting things the governor spent a lot of time talking about in his budget address was healthcare. This isn't a spending thing, but he included a push for numerous policies to try and go after private equity in healthcare, to try and have insurers cover, say, like school mental health treatment for students who maybe go to a therapist in class or in their educational facility. He also has talked a lot about maternal mortality. He's talked about women who need postpartum care. Some of this stuff is state funded. Some of this is also just policy. I want to keep an eye on that. I think healthcare is a very interesting issue that, is just always kind of in the background of our policy debates. And I'm curious to see, and I should say it's quite bipartisan. I mean, I think, everyone gets sick eventually. So you can find Republicans who sponsor making ACA requirements part of state law, such as that, you can stay on your parents' insurance until the age of 26. I talked earlier about how saying you want to do one thing and getting it done are very different things. But I'm keeping an eye on this to see how much energy Shapiro puts into passing them and how much reception there is from the legislature the House Democrats have pushed many of these proposals, for instance, to increase oversight of private equity acquisitions to hospitals. I'm curious to see how much Shapiro's backing makes a difference in getting those to his desk.
I got to be honest, Stephen, I didn't expect healthcare. I really thought you were going to take a sports angle here.
Yeah, I thought about it, but I think that as much as I have my hobby horses about how, like, maybe government spending shouldn't be directed to sporting events, like, healthcare matters to more people. So I'm going to go with the healthcare every time.
Once again, a very bold statement coming directly out of the Super Bowl. Stephen Caruso is the Capitol reporter for Spotlight PA. We will drop a link to reporting from he and his colleagues in our show notes. Stephen, thank you as always.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. We will be back tomorrow with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon. We were running through the list of Pittsburgh references. Gotta say, really appreciated hearing him make a Sheetz Wawa comparison in a way that made Sheetz the good example for the rest of the state.
This is where I have to reveal I'm extremely unrelatable in that I very rarely eat food from Sheetz or Wawa, and nor do I particularly care which place is selling me my overpriced gas.
I didn't say anything about which one was better. I just thought it was fun for our side of the state.
All right. I'm sorry, Megan. See, I'm a coastal elitist. What can I say?
But you went to Pitt.